and revitalization through the arts is a hot topic here in Rochester, nationally and regionally. And here to talk about it in Rochester is David J. Pacific. He's the Executive Director of the Joseph Avenue Arts and Culture Alliance. Thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you for bringing me here.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you about this.
You too.
So now, Joseph Avenue is a historic venue in Rochester. Talk a little about its history and background.
Oh, sure. It was formerly a synagogue. The northeast quadrant, when it was textile mills and a lot of production in the city, there was a large immigrant population that came from Europe and specifically Eastern Europe. And the synagogue itself was part of 16 that existed in that area at the time. This one was built in the 1920s. And it was the Temple B'nai Israel. And it was heavily used. The way the neighborhoods worked that time, just as we see the Joseph Avenue, Clinton Avenue, Hudson Avenue, they really were corridors and they really were communities, and the synagogue served as a hub. As the community changed over time, the synagogue fell into disuse, and the population moved eastward in the city as new populations moved into that region. And so eventually the synagogue became basically uninhabitable as it fell into disrepair. And we stumbled upon it as part of a feasibility study in 2011, looking at the northeast quadrant, looking up Joseph Avenue, and actually walking the entire avenue. And as we passed that synagogue, the last of its kind in the neighborhood, we were told this really is important. This is a historical, significant part of architecture. And so we began the process in 2011 of what do we do with it. And it was the community that actually set forth and said performing arts. So in 2014, the Joseph Avenue Arts and Culture Alliance was formed, and during that time we began the process of building the organization and also figuring out how do we take possession of this building, which finally did happen in 2016. And then because of the significance in the architecture, we moved towards having it placed on the historic registry. And so now the building itself is a historic landmark on both the state and federal level.
No kidding. That's big. And so now tell me about the role of the institution, the synagogue, in that neighborhood.
It really was like many worship spaces in that time. It was the place that you went. It was a resource for the community, and it was the central gathering place. What's remarkable is that if you go inside, you can actually see the family's names on bricks who actually helped build and sustain that congregation. And you see former worship centers that still exist in the neighborhood. Some are still in use. Some have been transitioned into other roles, and some are in disuse, and this happens to be one of those facilities.
I see. And are those families still active in Rochester? Can you find those names here?
There are many, many families that have memories of not only living in the northeast quadrant, but specifically on Joseph Avenue and having attended services at that actual temple.
Right. Now you mentioned textiles and manufacturing. That was the history of this neighborhood.
Sure. As those corporations and businesses were formed, and really we were the center for the textile region, part of the remarkable fact that Genesee flows north and that there's more cycling that you can actually do with the water, the Eastern European that moved here had that whole history as far as textiles are concerned, and the expertise to really build up that corridor in the region. So the northeast quadrant really was one of the most densely populated parts of the city as Rochester actually formed.
And it's always been connected with the arts, as far as I understand.
The northeast quadrant?
Yeah, and the corridor, and specifically Joseph Avenue.
There's always been an arts presence in Rochester, and part of that comes out of the old world coming to the new world. And you see that a lot with immigrant populations. As they came to the United States, the arts came with them, the culture came with them. You see it in architecture, you see it in the arts that have been sustained, in the buildings that have been produced, and really it's one of the historical imperatives that have created Rochester as an artistic hub that is known throughout the entire world.
And it seems to me that a lot of the names that are familiar, for instance, Zweigel's and some of the other textile firms, tailoring things, were founded in that neighborhood.
And you still see Hickey Freeman right on the corner of Avenue D and Clinton. And we have other companies, for instance, Champion was in Rochester for a very long time. And that textile history, it really hasn't lost its influence in the community. If you drive, even into East Rochester, you'll see weaving stores and yarn stores and fabric stores, and we have that history that helped build this community. And from that, from any industry and from cultures coming in from overseas, you build the arts with that.
Now, in terms of the arts, what kind of offerings are going to be at the synagogue?
Well, part of that happens with the way that we program. So we focus on the 4 major artistic areas, which are music, dance, theater, and the visual arts. And what we want to be is a community resource for all 4 of those aspects. We have a big community in the city that believes in the arts, that serves the arts, that attends the arts, but we have a huge void in the Northeast Quadrant.
I see.
Where there really is not an artistic presence or a way to access the arts, aside from a few people in the community who are really stepping up and trying to do something. And what we want to be, and what our model is that we offer all of our programming for free. That is part of our path towards inclusion, but certainly a means towards equity, so that anybody who's in the community, you have access to the arts, and anybody who wants to come from outside the community can come and join us and celebrate in the artistic offerings that make Rochester one of the world's best places to actually attend performances.
Now, how large is that synagogue?
It's about 11,000 square feet. And there are 2 levels of seating. So there will be ground level seating, and there will also be a curved balcony seating area. And it will seat about 300 people per performance.
So a nice medium-sized concert hall. And what kind of acoustic space or visual space is it?
So we've been working with the architects on the actual design of interior, and we're fortunate in Rochester that there are resources that we have here and community members who will step up and advise us. The space needs to serve all 4 of those art forms, and that's a challenge. That means a lot of input and a lot of ways to configure the space that we can actually make it not only usable, but truly a gem that people will appreciate as they perform with dance, as they perform with theater, and as we bring in musical performances like chamber music or visual performances through art gallery presentations, through film, or public speaking as well.
And for instance, a dancer needs a different kind of a floor than a chamber music group does.
And that's all the fine tuning in the architecture. So right now, as we're going through the building, being on the historic registry, meeting all of those requirements, we are considering the design aspects for the interior and how we would manipulate that space to serve all of the different artistic art forms.
Right, the requirements for access and everything are very tightly controlled for public spaces.
Sure.
And they're not always conforming with a historical space.
That's right, and that's part of our preservation process. So the exterior of the building, the stained glass of the building, the aesthetics of the building, that all needs to be retained. But this is 2019, and eventually it's going to be 2025. And we have to be meeting audiences now and audiences in the future. And there's a reason that cultural is in our title. It's part of the preservation of the community that actually built this facility and of this region. And cultural implies that, yes, there's the history involved of everybody who came here, but there's also the population that's there now, and there's who we wish to bring in the future.
I see. And who do we wish to bring in the future?
Well, our goal at the beginning is to serve the Northeast Quadrant. That is our community, and that's about giving access to the arts. But we also want to bring world-class performances, and we do that already, and we continue to grow in that direction. And part of that growth automatically attracts people who otherwise wouldn't necessarily come to that performance. But suddenly there's access for a person out in Palmyra to a free performance, or out in Batavia who wishes to come, or more locally in Pittsford, Brighton, or Greece. And so the audiences that we hope to attract are not limited by where we are or by what we do. Everything in our model is about giving access to the arts.
That's phenomenal. And so now, tell me about developing the relationships with the community. I mean, this has been a lot of work, coming in with a new structure and new organization in a community that's busy. Yeah,
part of it can be you have to get away from your desk, and you have to actually go out and talk to people and have those conversations and meet with community members. When you come in to any area, you have to also take a step back and realize, yes, we're from Rochester, but this is not necessarily where we directly live. But we are hoping to afford this community and the people there who have asked for it and who really wish to see more artistic presence in their community. So we have to listen, and that's the most important thing that we do. And we have to react to that, and we have to develop, and we have to change. And that all comes through conversations that you have with community members.
Because it's difficult to import something and say this is world class, you have to like it. I mean, maybe it doesn't fit with what the community.
Right, and part of world class performances or any artistic performances are a balance. You have to consider what should be performed, what is a high-level art form that we want to have a stage for, and what the demands of the actual audience are.
Right.
And it's always meeting those two goals. We are very, very fortunate that every person that we speak to within the community has something to contribute and wants to see this community and this building celebrated with the artistic presence that we hope to bring. And we want to elevate the community as well and give them a place so that the building itself, the Performing Arts Center, can be a cornerstone for the community as well.
Now, you mentioned that arts are happening now. What kind of productions have you been able to mount so far?
So we haven't gone small. About a year and a half ago, we dabbled into the actual production of performances, and it took off in a very, very big way. So far we have partnerships with the RPO that we bring out.
That's the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra.
The Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra that we will be planning to continue. We have Garth Fagan Dance that is performing with us. We have the Herb Smith and Freedom Trio, which is jazz.
Right, Herb's been a guest on this show.
That's right. And then we have gone international, where we have brought in big bands from Germany. 35-piece ensemble, where we also had film from the George Eastman archive projected behind them in a large celebration that we're already doing, and we're seeing attendance numbers well into the hundreds at our events.
That's fantastic.
And it comes from the community in the Northeast Quadrant, but from all over the region. And that's a really remarkable thing. Most arts organizations, there's always the audience development component of, how do we bring people into us? We are very fortunate that we attract people who want to get on board with our organization and people who want to attend our events. And that is a very, very fortunate position to be in because of the work that we are seeing from the community who makes this possible.
Now, if people can come for free and you're bringing acts from abroad, how does the funding work?
Well, we rely heavily on grant support, on private donations. Private donations are one of the most fundamental things that help us grow. Specifically because of names in the community that people might recognize, people who might remember that neighborhood from when they grew up. But it's certainly a challenge, but we're willing to mount it because access to the arts should not be limited by cost to the arts. And that's something we work very, very diligently toward. And it's not easy to adopt that model, to say everything we will do is free. Because it's not. We have to pay the artists, and we pay the artist rate. We have to pay the production companies. But when an audience member walks through our doors, they should be ready to enjoy that performance without being inhibited by the price of being able to attend.
That's great. And so you must have a board that helps you with this?
We have one of the most tirelessly and dedicated boards of any organization. Really, really a dream board that I cannot say enough about, that volunteer their time to actually move this organization forward rapidly. It's quite the commitment. Everybody is very, very active, and everybody brings in a different skill set that helps enable us on the trajectory that we wish to grow toward.
I see. Now, can people volunteer to help you?
We are always in need of volunteers. I am the lone paid staff member.
Oh my.
So I'm willing to give as much of my time and my energy as I can to bring these things to fruition, but I can't carry everything and I can't be in two places at once. So we welcome volunteers. Our website is very easy. It's josephavarts.org.
Say it again.
josephavarts.org. and you'll see a link for getting involved, and you can choose to volunteer with us.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, the building is under construction right now, is that correct?
The building is in our possession. It is a long process of actually having the blueprints approved, but we are very pleased to announce that just recently the federal government gave us the go-ahead to begin the construction.
Congratulations.
Yes, it's been quite a bit of back and forth, moving elevator shafts to make sure it's compliant, and making sure that we don't change the actual aesthetics or structure of the building that gives it its historical presence. But yes, this fall we will actually begin sealing up the building and beginning the process of working on the interior of the space and the exterior additions that we'll be putting on.
Now, will it be quiet, for instance? Can you record in there and that sort of thing? Musicians always need a good quiet backdrop.
Well, it will certainly be quiet enough to record. And part of that is in the engineering between the doors to the exterior and the lobby of the space. We have thought about where we will be putting the microphones, but of course that's going to take a specialist.
And air handling.
That's right. And we have the state involved in our energy component. We are really looking at this space as truly being not only state-of-the-art in its design, but also in the way that it can serve artists and the community.
Right.
And that takes a lot of diligence in the planning.
Right.
But the most important part is that when you walk through that door as an audience member, that you join the Joseph Avenue Arts and Culture Alliance as a member of our community, and this becomes your space. And that is always something that we are primarily focused on, from the artistic perspective and from the community perspective, making sure that it's a shared venture.
So are you accepting donations now from?
We welcome donations at any time. We love individual contributions. We love planning in your donations. This is a model that immediately sees results in the community. For instance, we don't have that space running right now, but every year we are increasing the amount that we are doing in programming, and that takes a lot of time on community partners to give us spaces. And again, we have to pay for every part of that production.
Right.
So donations at any level are something that help us on that mission and move us forward.
And where are the productions happening now if this building is in progress?
The City of Rochester has been wonderful to us. Mayor Lovely Warren and her staff have been remarkable in letting us use libraries, which have been, you know, when we first said we want to do concerts in the library, we sort of got a strange look.
I do them all the time.
That's right, and it's and now it's a constant venue for us. So we're at the Lincoln Branch Library, the Lyle Branch Library, the Central Library. We have been fortunate to use St. Michael's Church, which is on the corner of Clinton and Clifford, which is
well worth a visit in itself.
Yes, it is one of the most remarkable spaces if you can see the interior of it.
That's basically a Gothic church in the middle of Rochester.
Right. I don't know what makes it one step away from a cathedral, but it is quite the space. And little known about that church is that they actually have an adjacent hall, which was the original church. And you see that in this community also. You see these remnants of the history that actually propelled it forward, and you can actually see the spaces as they were built by the people who lived there. So we've been at St. Michael's. We've expanded further out into the southwest quadrant with congregations that have been in the northeast that have moved to the southwest using their spaces. And we have the rec centers have been absolutely wonderful to us when we need a really large space. That is a facility that is actively used by the community. We target specifically families that we would like to incorporate, and it gives us the opportunity to present to a larger audience in a venue that they're already familiar with. But what it takes are those community partners also. So without that space, you have to go in, have those conversations, and say, we want to do this. How do we make it possible?
Right. Now, will there be display space for visual arts? You mentioned visual arts.
Yep. So there will be a whole lounge that we are planning as an addition, an atrium, and that space will allow for galleries to present artwork that will be from the community, from around the world, and there are already people excited and on board with that. Visual arts present their own unique opportunity in that it can be an ongoing series. And that's part of the community space aspect, is how do you come in and just see the artwork, and how do you engage with the people that are actually in the space? How do we educate our audiences? We have 3 educational series coming up this fall with the Eastman School of Music, with Garth Fagan Dance, and also the formation of a community choir. And so we are not only bringing people into our audiences, but actually having them produce them. And that is its own challenge that the space will also enable. And then you come in, you see the visual artwork, and with the Film Institute coming at Eastman now, we also have opportunities for that sort of work that we can expand into. And we dabbled our fingers in it, but we hope to grow into it.
Well, you know, people get their art in so many ways now. I mean, you have all this electronic media. What's the plan for electronic dissemination?
Well, right now we have an e-newsletter that goes out weekly, and part of that is telling you what's coming up, and there's always a lot coming up. A critical component is also telling you what happened, because part of what people don't know is those who don't come to the events need to see what we're actually building and what we're creating. Our website continues to evolve and continues to grow so that it really can be a resource for people to come to. Just like any other arts organization in the city, you see our events, you see what we've done in the past, you see what we're doing in the future. We've moved toward a series model that we plan to continue, so that we have a music, art, dance, and visual art series, as well as some special events along the way that don't neatly fit into those categories. But so that if you have questions, if you want resources, they're available to you. You can engage with them as often as you'd like. And in the end, if you call 454-ARTS, you can speak with us. It's a very easy number to remember, and you get direct access to be able to talk to us about what we have going on.
That's wonderful. And so now, over the next 5 years, we see the building being completed, and you grow out your series and that sort of thing. Anything else on the horizon that we should know about?
There are many, many ideas that we form in our organization. Again, we have that dedicated board. And what's remarkable about the ideas and the plans is that some things sit there in the tentative realm, and some things really we say, who do we talk to, and how do we move this forward? And more frequently than not, it's somebody who will come to us and say, I have this idea, and we say, well, let's make it happen. So what you'll see in the next 5 years is that building will become a beacon in the community. As you travel up Joseph Avenue, you will see it right on your drive in the corridor. Right now it's a little difficult to see, but with the right kind of lighting, it'll really stand out, and of course with ample parking, you'll see it. But as far as plans on the horizon, it's always going to be a commitment to inclusion and to equity within the Northeast Quadrant and for the residents of Rochester as a whole.
That's an admirable goal.
Thank you.
Now, how are your relations with other presenting organizations? There are other presenters in Rochester, for instance.
With presenting organizations, we look at everything as a community partner, and that's critical because we are bringing in their art or whatever it is that they're producing. So part of our time is spent working with the artists and making sure that we can cultivate a space that will serve their needs. And we do. For instance, I mentioned the RPO that we've partnered with, and with Garth Fagan Dance, making those productions possible. And Finger Lakes Opera was a new one for us this year.
Finger Lakes Opera performed in your facility?
We had a soloist from Finger Lakes Opera who came and did a recital at St. Michael's. One of the aspects that we've moved towards is also access for the community to the artists themselves. So we provide free food at every one of our events.
That's phenomenal.
And part of that is the artist staying afterward to actually interact with the audience and talk to them. And there are ideas and questions and perspectives that an audience might have that you never dreamed of as a performing artist. So by having a free event, by having a community gathering afterwards with our partners, with the community, with food, with drinks, we are really providing a whole opportunity to holistically build this sort of experience for the community and really begin transforming not only lives but a region through the arts.
That's exciting. And so now it's very interesting about the whole neighborhood, and I know there's another performing arts facility a little bit adjacent to you,
A little bit north.
A little bit north. And so some of the activities are happening there as well. And the film is interesting. You need specifically film facilities for that. And projecting, there's a lot of electronics involved. And so I guess this is all part of your planning going forward.
Sure. And that's where you have brilliant architects and many friends in the arts who advise you. I have been fortunate in my own career to do producing of events, and of course I grew up on stage in the arts, but moving into the production of events that include all of the major art forms and things that you don't think about. So I can bring that voice. But then we rely heavily on people who actually do this for a living. And we are fortunate in this city that there are all of these little niche markets that people are really serving so that practically any art form is possible. And bringing that sort of resurgence of the arts and using it as a catalyst of change or for change in the community is enabled by our community partners.
Have you seen changes in the businesses or the street traffic or anything around your building?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a time that the Northeast Quadrant was a less desirable place to walk in the evening. Our concerts are in the evening. People must leave late at night, and there's safety. There's community support, there is constant engagement, and you see new businesses going up in the community, you see support from the city coming in, making new ventures possible. Recently I saw that they're going to be hopefully putting in some new apartment complexes that will be in the region brand new, and retail locations that will be in the Northeast Quadrant. So there's a true resurgence from the Business Association, now from our end in the Arts and Culture Alliance, to create the community in the 21st century that really built Rochester and this region at the turn of the 20th century.
Now you mentioned Alliance, and what is the Alliance? Is that your partners or your board, or discuss that a little?
The Alliance is essentially us. Alliance is a wonderful term because it really does focus on a partnership with everybody in the region that we work with. And we have talked, as we've expanded the organization, are we always going to be the Joseph Avenue Arts and Culture Alliance? Are we serving more of this community than just that corridor? And the answer is yes, but a name doesn't necessarily change that. And from the Alliance perspective, there's also what is involved in the arts, in the production, and what is involved in the culture, and marrying those two worlds. And that comes from the historical perspective that is implicit in how the community was built, and also the cultural perspective that exists today, and elevating both of those components. So that it really serves, our organization really serves both the history of the region, the people who remember it, and the people who live here now, and marrying those two worlds together.
Well, it's a fascinating project and an important one and a timely one, and we wish you all the very best of luck as you grow the Joseph Avenue Arts and Culture Alliance. My guest in the spotlight today has been David J. Pacific. He's the Executive Director. Thank you so much for talking.
Thank you.
In the Spotlight is a production of Penfield Television with sponsorship from Nokan & Associates, a private wealth advisory practice of Ameriprise Financial Advisor. If you enjoy this program, please find us on Facebook, like and share the program, and find our full playlist on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.